long because your speaker of the day is who you came to hear, and you did the right thing. I met Maralys almost by accident a couple of years ago. I had been scheduled to speak to a group of whom she happens to be a member. I had been caught in a terrible traffic problem and got there just as she was about to go on in my behalf. I didn't know why or what subject she was discussing. I knew nothing about Maralys Wills, but after that day, when I did the speaking instead of Maralys, I met her, and she had not only the courage, really, but the vision to put in my hands one of her own books. She knew that I had had 30 years or so of interviewing authors on radio and television programs, none of which I expect any of you to know anything about. But for 30 years or so, I interviewed people for a living, and many of them were authors. I was fascinated early on by who could get published and who couldn't. Having been a voracious reader all my life, even early in my own peculiar little career, I was fascinated by, for instance, a dentist who could get published a book entitled Teeth, 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 The Incredible World of Teeth. Now, as I mentioned this to you, I pray to heaven that none of you are related to that man. Please tell me if you are. It was one of my early experiences with a book that had no right to be on the shelves. It was a useless piece of work, a useless piece. And I have interviewed hundreds and hundreds of authors about whose work I wondered, beyond everything else, how it got published. And then knowing of all the books I'd read or heard about that didn't. I'm no great assessor of what is great work, it's just that I've read a lot. You know, a thought occurred to me as I was getting out of the chair. May I ask you to answer this? I have no right to ask it, but I'm awfully curious. Is it true that all writers stay up late at night? Or is there any writer in this room who goes to bed early? Some of you do, thank God. Maralys, you don't go to bed early, do you? I can't imagine it. I think part of the reason I may never be a brilliant writer is that I go to bed early, and it occurs to me that you guys don't. Writers never go to bed, I think. Well, anyway, all by way of saying, quickly, so that you can hear from her, she put into my hands Damn the Rejections, Full Speed Ahead. She knew that I had talked about wanting to be a writer, but never getting to the point of writing. She was under the mistaken impression that I was famous and that I would therefore get a publisher, whereas most people, Maralys included, have struggled to get published. I'm not famous. I was kind of famous for 15 minutes in 1975, which doesn't count now, I say. But through these last 2 years, Maralys has continued in our brief conversations and times together to say, you must write, you do have a story to tell, and I will show you how to believe what you've not believed about yourself. It's in here. I'm not even going to bother you with what I pulled out of it again this morning, thinking, I should read this again, except that's my mistake. I keep reading books rather than writing. And then I will write a sentence or two of inspiration about what I just read, but it never becomes a cohesive part of my own work. If any of you identify with that problem, you know, being a voracious reader so that you keep postponing your own writing, this is the woman to meet. Lastly, yes, Maralys and Bob Wills, her husband, have an unusual story. It's remarkable. You will learn about it if you read especially these two books. I have read everything I could get my hands on by Maralys Wills because I like the feeling of having my jaw sitting on my chest as I read. I have just absorbed these books in spite of the fact that I spent 30 years reading books and wanted never to see a book again when I finally decided I was retired, by virtue of the fact that nobody was hiring me anymore. That's how I knew I was retired. Yes, they've had a remarkable life. But the thing about Maralys, which I think she will leave with you today, is this. No matter what is going on in her life, including tragedy that takes your breath away, she continues to write. When she is bored, she writes. When she's in the middle of grief, she writes. When she has 20 things on the fire that have to be done that day, she writes. When one of her kids is lost, she writes. When another child is floundering, she writes. There is nothing in her life that stops her from writing. With that, I give you not only a great writer, but a mentor who wants you to succeed and pours herself out to anybody who asks for help. Maralys Wills.
I really ought to just sit down. I can't really top that. She is just as lovely as you think she is. We've become very good friends, and it was just because I did shove a book into her hands when she said something about writing her own story. I'm still absolutely convinced that she will be the first person I've mentored who will get sold easily. For two reasons: because she's absolutely charming, she has a great platform, and she can write. So I have discovered that. She gave me some stuff that she had written, and it was awfully good. I do want to talk about another introduction that I got once, which was a lady said to me, to the group, we don't know much about her. We got her at the last minute, and she didn't have time to send us her biopsy. As you can see, there is a huge difference between the right word and the almost right word. I just want to make a little